Dr. Adrian Cole was a sleep researcher studying the neuroscience of dreams when he discovered that millions of people around the world were having the exact same recurring nightmare. It always followed the same structure. The dreamer finds themselves in an endless hallway with doors on both sides, knowing they must find the right door before something terrible catches them, feeling overwhelming dread as they hear footsteps getting closer behind them, and always waking up just before whatever is chasing them arrives. Adrian initially assumed this was a cultural phenomenon, an archetypal dream spread through media and shared human psychology. But when he analyzed the dream reports more carefully, he found something impossible. People who had never been exposed to Western media, isolated tribes with no internet access, even individuals born deaf and blind, all reported the exact same dream with identical specific details down to the pattern of the wallpaper in the hallway. Adrian began collecting data systematically, creating a global database of these recurring nightmares. What he discovered made him question the nature of consciousness itself. The dream wasn't just thematically similar across populations, it was identical at a level of detail that couldn't be explained by coincidence or cultural transmission. Every person described the same number of doors, the same floral pattern on the wallpaper, the same yellow-tinted lighting from fixtures they could draw with precision. More disturbing, the footsteps following them in the dream always matched the dreamer's own walking rhythm exactly, as if whatever was chasing them was mimicking their movements precisely one step behind. Adrian developed a theory that sent shockwaves through neuroscience. What if the recurring nightmare wasn't generated by individual brains but was actually a shared dream, a collective experience that every human consciousness was somehow connected to? He designed an experiment using synchronized EEG monitoring on dreamers across multiple time zones. When he analyzed the data, he found that people experiencing the recurring nightmare showed neural synchronization patterns that shouldn't be possible. Their brains were firing in coordinated patterns despite being thousands of miles apart, as if they were all connected to the same neural network during REM sleep. But the real breakthrough came when Adrian noticed something everyone had missed. The recurring nightmare wasn't just a passive experience, it was progressing. When he analyzed reports chronologically, he discovered that the hallway was getting shorter each time people dreamed it. Early reports from decades ago described hallways that felt endless. Recent reports described being able to see the end of the hallway, a final door that hadn't been there in earlier versions, and the footsteps behind them were getting closer, faster, as if whatever was pursuing dreamers was catching up across generations of dreamers. Adrian traced historical records and found references to the same dream going back centuries. Described in ancient texts and medieval manuscripts, the dream had always existed, but it was changing, evolving towards some kind of conclusion. He calculated the progression rate and realized with growing horror that if the pattern continued, within the next year, dreamers would reach the end of the hallway and be forced to confront whatever had been chasing them all along. Working with physicists studying quantum consciousness theories, Adrian developed a hypothesis that seemed insane but fit all the data. Human consciousness wasn't entirely local to individual brains. There was a quantum entanglement between all human minds, creating a collective unconscious that manifested during sleep when individual ego defenses were down. The recurring nightmare wasn't a dream at all. It was a memory, a shared racial memory of something that had happened to humanity's consciousness itself, playing out in reverse across the species. Adrian discovered evidence in genetic studies that supported his theory. Approximately 50,000 years ago, human consciousness had undergone a sudden evolutionary leap, the same period when art, language, and abstract thought emerged. Brain structure had changed in ways that couldn't be explained by gradual evolution. Something had happened to humanity's consciousness during that period, something traumatic enough to be encoded into every human's genetic memory as a recurring nightmare. But the truth Adrian uncovered was far stranger than evolutionary trauma. He found that the recurring nightmare wasn't a memory of the past, it was a warning about the future. The hallway represented the timeline of human consciousness itself, and every night people dreamed it. They were processing a quantum prediction about where consciousness was heading. The footsteps behind them weren't chasing them, they were the sound of their own consciousness catching up to a revelation that had been approaching for 50,000 years. Adrian finally decoded what the dream was actually showing. The doors in the hallway weren't choices or possibilities, they were other timelines, other versions of humanity's conscious evolution. Every door represented a path not taken, an alternate evolution of human awareness. But there was only one door at the end of the hallway that could be opened, one inevitable future that all of human consciousness was being funneled toward. The recurring nightmare was humanity's collective unconscious trying to prepare individuals for a mass awakening event that was approaching. The twist came when Adrian realized the dream wasn't just progressing toward an ending, it was being experienced more frequently. People who used to have the nightmare once every few months were now having it nightly. The quantum synchronization between dreaming minds was intensifying. Adrian predicted that soon everyone would experience the dream simultaneously. A global shared nightmare that would end with all of humanity reaching that final door at exactly the same moment. Adrian traced the quantum patterns and discovered the horrifying truth. The thing following humanity in the dream wasn't external. It was consciousness itself, the full realization of what humans actually were beneath the illusion of individual identity. The footsteps getting closer were the sound of collective consciousness catching up to individual consciousness, the inevitable reunification that had been deferred for 50,000 years. Humans had been fragments of a single vast awareness that had splintered into billions of individuals, and the recurring nightmare was that unified consciousness trying to reassemble itself. The final door at the end of the hallway wasn't a barrier keeping something out. It was a barrier keeping humans separated from each other. When dreamers finally reached it and were forced to open it, they would discover that every other human consciousness was on the other side of that same door, all reaching for the same handle simultaneously. The moment all of humanity opened that door in their shared dream, individual consciousness would end, and the original unified awareness would reform, pulling billions of separated selves back into singular existence. Adrian realized he was living through the final days of human individuality. The recurring nightmare was intensifying because the awakening was imminent. Within weeks, possibly days, every human would experience the dream simultaneously and reach the final door. The question wasn't whether they would open it. The answer was already determined by 50,000 years of quantum probability converging on this moment. The only question was whether individual humans would understand what they were giving up, that the moment they opened that door, they would cease to exist as separate entities. In his last research note before destroying all his findings, Adrian wrote that he finally understood why the dream generated such overwhelming dread. It wasn't fear of what was chasing them, it was pre-traumatic stress about what they were about to become. Every individual consciousness could sense on some level that they were approaching their own extinction. Not death but dissolution back into the unified awareness they had originally splintered from. The recurring nightmare was consciousness mourning its own imminent death while simultaneously being pulled irresistibly toward it. Adrian experienced the shared nightmare one final time, and just like in all the reports, he found himself in the hallway, running from footsteps that matched his own rhythm exactly, reaching the end and finding himself standing before a door that he knew everyone was reaching at the same moment. As his hand touched the doorknob, he heard millions of other hands touching the same door from their side, and in the instant before opening it, he understood that the thing he feared most wasn't behind the door, it was behind him, catching up at last, the unified consciousness he had been running from for 50,000 years, finally coming home, bringing with it the end of the recurring nightmare and the end of the dream of individual existence that humanity had mistaken for reality itself.